This is the stuff that goes on in big packing plants. A bed of guts covering the whole floor. Now just hundreds or maybe thousands of pig heads. Oh Jesus, man. More guts on the floor. Overflowing bins. What happens to all this? Shout out to David Olmos. He worked at this JBS facility in Louisville, Kentucky. Post stuff like this to expose them. When you buy bacon or sausage or some other pork at the store, this is where it comes from. Factory farming sucks.
In the 1930s, the Rothschild-Rockefeller Alliance, they began funding scientific studies to look at how musical frequencies can prepare the masses for war. And that's because they wanted to control people. They want that mind control programming. And so in 1938, there was a gentleman named Harold Burris Meyer, and he was a theatrical designer and a sound engineer. And he began developing techniques that would control the emotional response of audiences and to create mass hysteria. And so from there, you have this, this Rockefeller-Rothschild alliance. Not only were they looking at ways to steer the masses, but they wanted to change the standard tuning of A to 440 hertz. So in 1939, they began funding Joseph Goebbels, who was the Nazi propagandist. And at that time, Joseph Goebbels, he wanted to change the standard tuning of A. And so he organized a meeting in London to do that. Now, up until that time, the standard tuning of A was set at 435 hertz, and that was from a conference in Vienna in 1889. But they wanted to shift it to 440 hertz. And so Radio Berlin approached the British Standard Association and asked if they would organize this conference in London, which was a total setup in which, the powers that be had control of what the outcome was going to be. And they didn't invite any of the French musicians because they were opposed to 440 hertz. And then the organizers of the conference, they interviewed the musicians, the instrument makers, the physicists, and then also the sound engineers. And if any of those people were against 440 hertz, then they weren't invited to the conference.
Way.
So it was all controlled. And, as a result, it's not surprising that the standard tuning of A was changed to 440 hertz. And that happened June 1939, just months before World War II broke out. And the timing of that is no coincidence because 440 hertz is a destructive frequency. And that, it can retrain our thoughts towards disharmony, disruption, and disunity.
Yesterday, I met with many of the prison leaders in this country who are talking about changing the food in the prisons for public safety reasons. Because we know in their study after study, and you can go on Google and look them up, and show when they change the food to real food in prisons, the violence goes down by 40 or 50%. Disciplinary problems drop by 40 or 50%. Use of restraints in juvenile detention facilities go down by 70%. Oh, this is a mental health issue as well as a behavioral issue, as well as a physical health issue.
Bill Gates is now backing something called sun-dimming technology that would reflect sunlight out of the Earth's atmosphere.
Bill Gates is backing the first high-altitude experiment of one radical climate change solution, creating a massive chemical cloud that could cool the Earth, and it's highly controversial. It would look something like this. Thousands of planes would fly very high and use nozzles to inject millions of tons of light-reflecting particles into the stratosphere. It would create a thin chemical cloud of those particles around the whole planet, blocking some sunlight from reaching the surface. It would mimic a giant volcanic eruption, which we know cools the Earth.
Now, just to restate, Bill Gates is not God. This is not just over his yard in Seattle. This is over your yard.
You be the judge. If you're awake, you already know what comes next. Support the movement. Show where you stand. Your voice carries further than you think.